Watching the ashes of a stolen Ivy League future float up the chimney, a wicked smile crossed a mother's face. Those arrogant parents actually incinerated full-ride college acceptance letters just to fund their golden child's Hollywood vanity project. But they forgot one massive, life-ruining digital detail. Welcome to absolute revenge. If you walked into the Vance family home in the quiet, upper-middle-class suburb of Crestwood, you would immediately assume I didn't exist. The foyer, the living room, the hallways, every square inch of drywall was dedicated to the altar of Chloe. There were framed glossies of Chloe in her toddler pageant dresses, Chloe starring in the middle school production of Annie, and Chloe posing on the beaches of Malibu during a summer acting camp that cost my parents a second mortgage. I am Eleanor. I am precisely 342 days older than Chloe, a biological technicality my parents treated as an unfortunate administrative error. I was the practice child, the beta test. Chloe was the polished, final release. My parents, Richard and Susan Vance, weren't just supportive of Chloe's dreams of Hollywood stardom. They were rabidly, delusionally obsessed. They viewed her potential fame as their ultimate retirement plan, an investment that required the absolute sacrifice of everything and everyone else in our orbit. By the time I was 16, the financial strain of cultivating a star was beginning to show its ugly cracks. Chloe needed private vocal lessons with Madame Dubois at $150 an hour. She needed monthly portfolio updates with a celebrity photographer in the city. She needed a dedicated social media manager to artificially inflate her Instagram following, so she looked like an established influencer. To fund this, my parents stripped my life down to the studs. We're a team, Eleanor, my father, Richard, would say, adjusting his tie in the mirror before heading off to his mid-level accounting job. And right now, the team needs to rally behind our strongest player. You understand, don't you? When Chloe makes it, she'll buy you a mansion. Understanding meant wearing Chloe's discarded, out-of-season clothes. It meant quitting the debate team because my parents couldn't be bothered to pick me up after school gas was expensive, and Chloe needed the Mercedes for her auditions. It meant getting a job at a greasy local diner called the Copper Skillet, only to have my mother demand 70% of my tips for rent and groceries, money I later found out went directly toward a pair of designer boots Chloe needed for a callback that never materialized. But being the invisible glass child gave me one distinct advantage. I could operate completely under the radar. Because my parents never asked about my day, they didn't know I was taking AP Physics, AP Calculus, and Advanced Computer Science. They didn't know that my school counselor, Mrs. Gable, had looked at my SAT scores and nearly choked on her coffee. And they certainly didn't know that I had been spending my late nights in the back of the local public library, using their free Wi-Fi to submit college applications to some of the most prestigious engineering programs in the country. I wanted to build robotics. I wanted to create software. Most of all, I wanted an escape hatch that was so airtight, so bulletproof, that my parents couldn't drag me back into their sinking ship. I applied for every academic scholarship, every financial aid grant, and every diversity in STEM program I could find. I used Mrs. Gable as my primary contact, and I deliberately routed almost all my digital correspondence to a newly created, highly secure email address. I knew that if my parents caught wind of my ambitions, they would view them as a threat. Any dollar I might need for a dorm room was a dollar stolen from Chloe's inevitable Oscar campaign. But I made one crucial mistake in my meticulous planning. During the frenzied, exhausted blur of filling out the Common App at 2 a.m., I left my home address as the default for physical mailings. I didn't think it mattered. In the digital age, who cares about paper? I would soon find out exactly how much paper mattered to my parents. The spring of our senior year arrived with a suffocating tension in the house. Chloe's career was stalling. She was 18, conventionally pretty, but utterly devoid of the work ethic required to actually succeed in an industry swimming with hungry talent. She spent her days filming lip-sync videos in her bedroom and her nights complaining that her agent, a sketchy guy named Vince, who charged my parents a monthly retainer, wasn't getting her enough auditions. Then came the grand pivot. Chloe decided that to truly break into the industry, she needed to attend the prestigious and notoriously expensive West Coast Conservatory of the Dramatic Arts in Los Angeles. It was a private, for-profit institution that practically accepted anyone who could clear a check. The tuition was a staggering $85,000 a year, not including housing in one of the most expensive cities on earth. My father sat at the kitchen table one evening, staring blankly at a mountain of credit card bills. "We'll figure it out," he muttered to my mother, rubbing his temples. "We just need a bridge loan. Or another stream of income." I was wiping down the counters, wearing my grease-stained diner uniform. I felt a cold chill run down my spine as my mother slowly turned her head to look at me. Her eyes didn't see her eldest daughter. They saw a walking, breathing ATM. It was a Tuesday in early April, the kind of crisp, bright spring day that makes you feel like the universe is finally aligning in your favor. I had already received the emails. Stanford had offered me a full-ride scholarship for their computer science and engineering program. Columbia had offered a massive financial aid package. MIT had waitlisted me, but I didn't even care. I was going to California. I was going to be free. I had spent the last 3 days walking on clouds, quietly accepting the Stanford offer through their secure online portal. I set up my student ID, registered for my freshman housing lottery, and even ordered a cheap, secondhand Stanford hoodie that I kept hidden at the bottom of my gym bag. When I walked through the front door of my house after my afternoon shift at the diner, the silence was immediate and oppressive. Usually, the house echoed with the sound of Chloe practicing her vocal scales or my mother loudly complaining on the phone to customer service about something. Today, it was dead quiet. I took off my coat and walked into the living room. My mother, Susan, was sitting in the center of the plush white sofa. My father, Richard, was standing by the fireplace, his arms crossed over his chest. And Chloe was sprawled out in the armchair, swirling a diet soda, a smug, venomous little smile playing on her glossed lips. On the coffee table in front of my mother sat 3 large, thick, glossy envelopes. The ceremonial acceptance packages. My heart did a strange, painful flutter against my ribs. I had completely forgotten they would send physical welcome packets. The Stanford emblem practically glowed in the dim light of the living room, alongside the powder blue crest of Columbia. "Sit down, Eleanor," my father said. His voice was dangerously calm, the voice of a judge about to hand down a sentence. I didn't sit. I stayed hovering near the doorway, my hands gripping the strap of my backpack. "You went through my mail," I stated, trying to keep my voice steady. It was a federal offense. Not that the Vances cared about federal laws when Chloe's destiny was at stake. "We intercepted it," my mother corrected smoothly, as if there were a difference. She picked up the Stanford envelope, tapping it against her manicured fingernails. "Imagine our surprise, Eleanor. We had no idea you were applying to out-of-state colleges, let alone private institutions. You know very well we cannot afford this." "I have a full-ride scholarship," I said quickly. "It says it right there in the letter. Tuition, room, board. It's entirely covered. I won't need a single dime from you." Chloe let out a sharp, theatrical scoff. "God, Ellie, you are so incredibly selfish." I whipped my head toward her. "Selfish? For getting a scholarship? For trying to abandon this family when we need you the most?" Chloe snapped, sitting up. "I got into the West Coast Conservatory today. My dream school, Eleanor. The place that is going to launch my entire career. Congratulations," I said flatly. "What does that have to do with me?" My father stepped forward. "The conservatory requires a substantial financial commitment. Your mother and I have looked at the numbers, and the reality is we are tapped out. We've leveraged the house, we've maxed the credit lines. But Chloe cannot miss this opportunity. It is a once-in-a-lifetime window." "Okay," I said, a sense of dread pooling in my stomach. "So she takes out student loans, like normal people." "Actors shouldn't be burdened with crippling debt right out of the gate," my mother scolded me, offended by the very concept. "It stifles their creativity." "No, Eleanor, we have a different plan. You are going to defer these acceptances, or decline them altogether. You are going to stay here in Crestwood, get a full-time job, perhaps a managerial position at the diner, or data entry downtown, and you are going to contribute your wages to Chloe's tuition fund. In a few years, when Chloe is established and earning real money, she will pay for you to go to whatever local community college you'd like." I stood there, paralyzed. I literally stopped breathing for a few seconds as my brain tried to process the sheer audacity, the monumental narcissism of what they were demanding. They wanted me to sacrifice my Ivy League, full ride education to work minimum wage, to pay for my sister's vanity degree. No, I whispered. Excuse me? My father barked. No, I said, louder this time, my voice trembling with rage. I am absolutely not doing that. I earned these scholarships. I worked in secret for 4 years while you threw thousands of dollars into a bottomless pit. I am leaving in August, and I am never looking back. My mother's face contorted into a mask of pure fury. She stood up, snatching the envelopes off the table. You ungrateful little brat. After everything we've provided for you, the roof over your head, the food in your stomach. I buy my own groceries, I yelled back. You take my tips. You've never supported me, not once. These are my letters. Give them to me. I lunged forward to grab them, but my father intercepted me. He grabbed me by the shoulders and shoved me hard. I stumbled backward, hitting the edge of the doorway. You are not going to California, my father said, his face inches from mine. You are not abandoning your sister. You are 18. Living under my roof, and as long as you are in this family, you contribute to the family. He turned to my mother and held out his hand. Susan, give them to me. My mother handed the thick envelopes to him. He walked over to the fireplace, which was crackling with a late spring fire. Dad, what are you doing? I asked, a sudden panic lacing my voice. Those are official documents. Don't. You can't go to a school if you're not accepted, Eleanor, my father said coldly, and you can't accept an offer if you don't have the paperwork. The decision is made. With a flick of his wrist, he tossed the Stanford and Columbia acceptance packages straight into the roaring flames. No, I screamed. Chloe laughed, a short, cruel little giggle from the armchair. I watched in manufactured horror as the heavy cardstock caught fire. The beautiful Stanford crest curled and blackened, the pages outlining my dorm assignments, my meal plans, my brilliant, shining future turned to gray ash and floated up the chimney. There, my mother said, brushing her hands together as if she'd just taken out the trash. Now, tomorrow morning, I expect you to ask your boss at the diner for full-time hours. We have a tuition deposit for Chloe, due by the end of the month. I sank to my knees on the hardwood floor. I put my hands over my face and began to sob. Deep, heaving, pathetic sobs. My shoulders shook, and I let out a wail of absolute defeat. Oh, stop the dramatics, my mother sighed, stepping over me to head to the kitchen. You'll thank us one day when Chloe wins her first Emmy. My father patted my shoulder awkwardly, the closest thing to affection he'd shown me in a decade. It's for the best, Ellie. Family first. They left me there on the floor. Chloe walked past me, lightly kicking my sneaker. Don't be jealous forever, Elle. It causes wrinkles. I stayed on the floor, my face buried in my hands, listening to their footsteps fade into the kitchen, listening to the popping of the fire that had just consumed my future. But the tears on my face? They weren't from heartbreak. I was crying because I was laughing so hard I couldn't breathe. I kept my hands clamped over my mouth to muffle the sound of my hysterical giggles. My parents, in all their arrogant, narcissistic glory, were absolute boomer dinosaurs. They had just dramatically burned a few pieces of ceremonial cardstock, genuinely believing that in the year 2026, a university relies on a returned piece of paper via the U.S. Postal Service to finalize enrollment. They thought they had destroyed my path. They thought they had trapped me. They had absolutely no idea that my enrollment was already finalized, digitally locked in 3 days ago. They had no idea that I had already electronically signed the scholarship agreement. And, most importantly, they had no idea that my backpack, which was resting on the floor right beside me, had its side pocket slightly unzipped. Peeking out from the mesh was my cracked smartphone, the camera lens perfectly angled at the fireplace, quietly recording the entire psychotic, abusive encounter. They wanted a movie star in the family. I was about to give them the performance of a lifetime. For the next 4 months, I gave an Oscar-worthy performance that would have put Chloe to shame. I became the broken, defeated, entirely compliant daughter my parents always wanted. The morning after the fireplace incident, I walked downstairs with red, puffy eyes, mostly from staying up until 4 a.m., finalizing my housing portal for Stanford, and told my parents I had spoken to my manager at the Copper Skillet. I told them I was taking on double shifts. My mother didn't even look up from her iPad. Good. See that you put the money in the jar on the fridge every Friday." What my parents didn't know was that my manager, Brenda Higgins, a fiercely protective woman who had survived 2 divorces and ran that diner with an iron fist, knew exactly what my family was like. When I broke down in the break room and told Brenda the whole story, she didn't just offer sympathy. She offered a tactical alliance. Brenda drove me to a local credit union the very next day and helped me open an independent bank account that my parents couldn't touch. Every week, Brenda would hand me a fake, significantly reduced cash envelope to drop in my mother's tuition jar, while direct depositing the bulk of my actual earnings and overtime into my secret account. I was building my escape fund, right under their noses. Meanwhile, the Vance household was descending into a state of manic financial panic. Chloe's West Coast Conservatory was demanding an initial, non-refundable deposit of $25,000 by mid-July. My father, Richard, was sweating through his shirts. My mother was frantically calling relatives, burning bridges as aunt after uncle politely declined to invest in Chloe's stardom. Then came the twist that nearly derailed everything, but ultimately handed me the silver bullet I needed to destroy them. In late June, I received an automated email alert from a free credit monitoring app I had downloaded a year prior. It notified me of a hard inquiry on my credit report from a predatory private lending company called Apex Financial. My blood ran cold. I immediately logged in and saw the horrifying truth. An application for a $45,000 private student loan had been submitted in my name, with Chloe listed as the beneficiary. My parents, absolutely tapped out of their own credit lines, had stolen my social security number. They were trying to saddle me with a massive, high-interest loan to pay for my sister's fake Hollywood education. I didn't scream. I didn't confront them. I calmly picked up my phone, called Apex Financial's fraud department, and reported the application as identity theft. I placed a total freeze on my credit profile with all 3 major bureaus. The loan was instantly flagged and canceled. When the rejection letter from Apex arrived in the mail a week later, I watched my father read it in the kitchen. The color completely drained from his face. He looked like a man who had just watched his house burn down. He couldn't even yell at me about it, because to do so would be to admit he had committed federal fraud. "Everything okay, Dad?" I asked innocently, pouring myself a glass of water. He crumpled the letter, his hands shaking. "Fine. Just junk mail." The pressure cooker was whistling. August was rapidly approaching. Chloe was spending her days packing designer clothes into expensive, monogrammed luggage my parents couldn't afford, complaining loudly that she wouldn't have enough spending money for networking dinners in Los Angeles. My departure date for Stanford was August 18th. Chloe's move-in day in LA was August 20th. The collision course was set. It was August 17th, the night before my flight to San Francisco. I had been slowly smuggling my belongings out of the house for weeks, hiding my clothes and essential items in the trunk of Brenda's car during my shifts. My bedroom looked exactly as it always had, empty, impersonal, and mostly serving as secondary storage for Chloe's overflow wardrobe. We were all gathered in the living room. My mother was painstakingly folding Chloe's cashmere sweaters, while my father aggressively refreshed his banking app on his phone, looking for a miracle that wasn't coming. They were roughly $15,000 short for the final payment required before Chloe could even step foot on the conservatory campus. "Eleanor," my mother said, not looking up, "go get the jar from the kitchen. We need to count your contributions. It's time to finalize the cashier's check." I stood up. But I didn't go to the kitchen. I walked to the center of the living room, sliding my hands into my pockets. "There's only about $400 in the jar, Mom," I said smoothly. My mother stopped folding. She looked up, her brow furrowing. "Excuse me? You've been working double shifts for 4 months. There should be at least $6,000 in there." "There isn't," I replied, "because I've been putting my money into a private bank account to buy my laptop, my textbooks, and my plane ticket." The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator 3 rooms away. Chloe dropped her phone. "What did you just say?" My father stood up, his face flushing violently red. "What plane ticket? What the hell are you talking about, Eleanor?" "My flight to San Francisco leaves tomorrow at 9 a.m., I said, my voice steady, ringing with an authority I had never felt before. "I'm going to Stanford. Classes start in 2 weeks. My mother let out a hysterical, mocking laugh. "Are you insane? We burned those letters. You have no acceptance. You missed the deadlines months ago. It's 2026, Mom, I said, a slow, predatory smile spreading across my face. Do you honestly think a multi-billion-dollar institution relies on a piece of paper sent through the mail? I accepted the offer digitally 3 days before you dramatically threw some ceremonial cardstock into the fire. You lied to us, Chloe shrieked, jumping up. You let me think we had the money for my tuition. You ruined my life. You ruined your own life, Chloe, I snapped, turning to face her. You have zero talent, zero work ethic, and you're entering an industry that eats lazy people alive. But that's not my problem anymore. My father marched toward me, his fists clenched at his sides. You are not leaving this house. I will cancel that flight right now. You are going to transfer every dime you have into my account, or so help me God. Or what, Dad? I interrupted, my voice dropping an octave, cold as ice. You'll steal my identity again? My father froze. He stopped dead in his tracks, his mouth hanging open slightly. Oh, did you think I didn't know? I pulled my phone from my pocket and pulled up the screenshot of the Apex financial fraud report. I held it up for him to see. Attempting to open a $45,000 line of credit in your daughter's name without her consent. That's identity theft. It's wire fraud. It carries a mandatory federal prison sentence. My mother gasped, pressing her hand to her chest. Eleanor, you wouldn't. I absolutely would, I promised her, looking directly into her eyes. I reported it as fraud and froze my credit. That's why your little scheme failed. And if you ever try to contact me, ask me for money, or try to stop me from walking out that front door tomorrow, I will take this report along with this. I tapped my screen and pulled up the video. The audio filled the quiet living room. My father's voice, clear as day. You can't go to a school if you're not accepted, Eleanor. Followed by the visual of him tossing my mail into the fire. Destruction of mail is also a federal offense, I whispered. I have you on tape destroying my property and trying to sabotage my future. I have the paper trail of you trying to steal my identity to fund Chloe's delusion. I have it all backed up to 3 separate cloud drives. The look on their faces was something I will cherish for the rest of my life. The utter shock. The realization that the quiet, invisible glass child had entirely outmaneuvered them. The power dynamic of the room hadn't just shifted. It had completely inverted. You're a monster, Chloe sobbed, collapsing dramatically onto the sofa. No, I said, grabbing my backpack from the floor. I'm just the practice child. You guys made sure I was built tough. Now, Brenda is outside in her car waiting to pick me up. I'm spending the night at her place, and I am flying out tomorrow. I walked to the front door, pulling it open. The warm August night air flooded in. Don't call me, I said, looking back at the 3 of them one last time. Don't look for me. Have a great time in Hollywood. I walked out, shutting the door firmly behind me. The karma that hit them was brutal, fast, and entirely self-inflicted. Without my contributions or the fraudulent loan, Chloe never made it to the West Coast Conservatory. She was forced to take local acting classes where she quickly realized she couldn't stand the criticism. Within 6 months, her agent, Vince, dropped her. She's currently 22, living in my old bedroom and working the morning shift at a smoothie bowl shop in the mall. My parents' financial house of cards collapsed spectacularly. The second mortgage they took out to fund Chloe's early pageants and camps caught up with them. They were forced to sell the house in Crestwood at a massive loss just to avoid bankruptcy, downsizing to a cramped 2-bedroom apartment. As for me, I just finished my junior year at Stanford. I hold a 3.9 gigapascals in mechanical engineering, and I recently accepted a wildly lucrative summer internship at a major aerospace robotics firm in Silicon Valley. I never spoke to them again. I never looked back. They tried to burn my future, but all they really did was light the match that guided me out of the dark. If you loved this story of ultimate revenge and hard karma, smash that like button and hit subscribe. Have you ever had a toxic family member try to sabotage your success? Sound off in the comments below, and don't forget to share this video with someone who needs a reminder to never let anyone extinguish their fire.